Yeah.
So could you talk about how behavior analysis has evolved over the years?
Yeah, your kind of really condensed quick history is that it came about as a lot of different weird areas of research in the late 1800s and early 1900s over about a 40-year period. And the big thinking there was so much looking in to this sort of introspective, what's going on internally, thinking about um, your different subconscious, conscious states, things like that, that there was a really big swing. And what behavior analysis was trying to do is really look at the external environment, what was influencing your behavior from that. So environment for us is anything that's not what you're doing, is how I usually like to describe it. So anything that's potentially around you in your immediate environment, but also culture, your genetics, your learning history, all of these things can influence things. But there was a period of, I would say, decades of really nerdy experimental research, primarily with non-humans. We're talking about rats, pigeons, and a lot of very, I would say, highly controlled, very specific, and usually very like prestigious places. Skinner was the main person that kind of shaped this field, and he was placed at Harvard for most of his career. And so I guess it felt like this very ivory tower, very contradictory way of approaching psychology. And what happened there is almost like this kind of counter swing that happened in the 60s and 70s, which was behavior analysis was working very well for certain applications. And this was in understanding a lot of different ways in which human behavior evolved and I guess was influenced through reinforcement, punishment, things like this. But it wasn't doing a fantastic job in some areas of, like, say, mental health. And part of that was there was a lot of research that needed to be done. People were during this time were figuring out where it worked, where it didn't work, this sort of thinking. And so the swing back from that was really, I would say, like this, not like an anti-ABA movement, but just kind of a let's go back and look at thoughts, feelings, urges, and see what role those sort of have. And that was dominant for quite a while as well. And there was a couple different things that happened there. Like there's this new kind of dominant theory that was coming in of cognitive behavioral therapy, and there was no set standards for who could call themselves a behaviorist or a behavior analyst. There was no set training of like what experience you needed to have, and so there was I know there's a lot of experimental stuff that was going on in the sense of could we apply this sort of thinking in different ways. So this is where like the work of Ivar Lovaas started to shape up for early intensive behavioral intervention for children with autism. And we'll kind of come back to that in a second, but there's also more controversial therapies. One of them that I always like to acknowledge was there was an actual conversion therapy that was developed, experimented with in the 70s. For the goal there was to convert people from, say, what was perceived as like homosexual tendencies into something else without their with maybe like parental or guardian consent, but really that was one thing. The entire community actually came against that and said this is not something we should be doing, but it tainted the field, rightfully so, but it was something that was done there. And so to kind of, I guess,
What happened
transition
with
a little
that?
bit. So with that, it never developed into like a program or like a service that continued on. But it's one of those things where the actions of a select few can taint and the rest of the community moving forward. And so it's talked about sometimes as to look at what this field's done. And the big thing there is this field doesn't do that anymore. It hasn't for, I don't know, going on 40 years now or something like that. And the professional communication around that time was this is unacceptable and shouldn't be happening. And so I would say in the behavior analysis community, it is completely not accepted in today's day and age, and looked at as I would say a failure in some of our training systems and peer review sort of systems and things like that.
You've been watching Autism Knows No Borders. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Also, we'd love to hear from you, so let us know what you think in the comments section. Click here to watch this interview in its entirety. You can also find us on your favorite podcast app. Tune in each week for engaging conversations of how people across the globe are inspiring change and building community. Thanks for watching. Take care.